He found two alien sisters freezing in the snow. Now both refused to leave his side. The blizzard screamed across the mountain like a living thing. Hungry and cold and endless in its fury, Park Junho stood at his cabin window and watched the white chaos swallow the world outside, his breath fogging the glass as temperatures dropped far below what any sensible person would call survivable. He had lived alone on this mountain for 3 years now, ever since he retired from search and rescue. And he had seen storms that would make grown men weep, but this one felt different somehow. His dog, a large mixed breed named Bomi, suddenly lifted her head from her spot near the fire and let out a low growl that slowly transformed into frantic barking. "What is it, girl?" Junho asked. Turning away from the window, Bomi ran to the door and scratched at the wood. Whining between her barks, her entire body trembling with urgency he had never seen before. That was when he saw it through the frosted window, a streak of light cutting through the storm clouds. Falling too slow to be lightning and too bright to be anything natural, it disappeared behind the tree line to the north, and the ground shook slightly beneath his feet. That was no meteor, he whispered to himself. Bomi barked again, louder this time, and Junho felt something pull at his chest. An instinct he had learned to trust during his years of rescuing people from mountains and floods and disasters of every kind. Someone needed help out there. He grabbed his heaviest coat and pulled on his boots, wrapping a scarf around his face as Bomi continued her desperate noise. "Stay here and guard the house," he commanded. And though she whined in protest, she obeyed the moment he opened the door. The cold hit him like a physical wall, stealing the breath from his lungs and biting through his layers as if they were made of paper. He had maybe 30 minutes in this weather before hypothermia became a serious threat. 45 if he kept moving. The flashlight in his hand barely cut through the swirling white, but he pushed forward anyway, following the direction where he had seen the light fall. Every step was a battle against wind that seemed determined to push him back home, to save him from whatever foolish mission he had set himself upon. After 20 minutes of fighting through snow that reached his thighs, he found it. The object was half buried in a snowdrift, shaped like a teardrop and made of metal that gleamed despite the lack of light. Clearly not from this world, an escape pod his mind supplied. Though he had no framework for such a thing existing, he brushed snow away from what looked like a window and shone his light inside. And his heart nearly stopped. Two figures lay tangled together inside, both clearly not human, with skin that seemed to shimmer between blue and silver, large eyes closed in unconsciousness, and delicate features that reminded him somehow of both birds and cats. One was clearly an adult, her arms wrapped protectively around a smaller one, a child. He realized with a jolt of protective fury that surprised him their skin was turning gray at the edges, and frost had begun to form on their thin clothing. And he knew without any doubt that they were dying. "Hold on," he said, though they could not hear him. "I am going to get you out of there." It took him precious minutes to find the release mechanism, his fingers numb and clumsy as he pried at panels until something clicked and the pod hissed open. The adult female did not stir when he touched her, her body cold and limp as he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, light as a bird despite being nearly as tall as him, and he wondered briefly what kind of world had produced beings so fragile. He could not carry them both at once. So he made a terrible choice and carried the child first, running through the snow as fast as his burning legs would allow, crashing through his cabin door and laying the small alien on the rug before the fire. "Watch her, Bomi," he gasped, and then he was running back into the white hell outside. The adult was right where he had left her, and her skin had turned even grayer, and he was certain he was too late as he lifted her and began the long fight back to warmth. By the time he kicked open his cabin door for the second time, his own vision was swimming and his body had stopped shivering, which he knew was a very bad sign. He laid the adult beside the child and immediately began stripping away their frozen clothing, wrapping them both in every blanket he owned and positioning them close to the fire, but not too close. Then he filled hot water bottles and tucked them against their bodies. And he brewed tea and dripped it carefully between their lips. And he rubbed their hands and feet to encourage blood flow. For hours he worked, fighting for the lives of two beings he did not know, could not understand, had no reason to save, beyond the simple fact that they needed saving. The child's color began to return first, the gray fading back to that beautiful blue-silver. And Junho felt tears freeze on his cheeks as relief flooded through him. The adult was slower to respond. But eventually, her breathing deepened and her skin warmed, and he allowed himself to believe they might actually survive. Exhaustion pulled at him as dawn began to lighten the windows. But he refused to sleep, keeping watch over his strange guests as Bomi curled up at the child's feet like a guardian. It was near midday when the adult's eyes finally opened, large and golden, and filled with immediate terror as she saw him sitting beside her sister. She tried to move, to fight, to protect the child, but her body would not obey her commands. "Easy," Junho said softly, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You are safe here. I promise you are safe." She did not understand his words. He could see that clearly. But something in his tone or his posture made her pause. Her golden eyes moved from him to the child beside her, who was breathing evenly and wrapped in warm blankets, and then to the fire crackling nearby, and finally to the dog who watched her with curious but gentle eyes. Confusion replaced the terror on her face. She had been taught that Earth was a death world, that humans were monsters who killed anything different from themselves, that landing here meant certain doom. Yet here she was, warm and alive, and a human was sitting beside her with nothing but concern in his strange round eyes. She wanted to stay awake, to understand, to protect her sister from whatever trick this must be, but her body betrayed her, and darkness pulled her back down into sleep. And her last thought before unconsciousness claimed her was a question she had no answer for. Why had the monster saved them? He found two alien sisters freezing in the snow. Now both refused to leave his side. 2 days had passed since the storm, and Vela still could not make sense of the creature who had saved them. She sat in the corner of the cabin, wrapped in blankets, watching the human move around his small home with movements that seemed too gentle for a predator from a death world. Her sister Kira remained unconscious on the soft bed the human had given up for her, her small chest rising and falling with each breath while fever burned through her fragile body. Every instinct Vela possessed screamed at her to run, to grab Kira and flee into the frozen wilderness outside, to take her chances with the cold, rather than wait for the human to reveal his true nature. But she was too weak to stand for more than a few moments, and Kira could not be moved, and deep down in a place she refused to examine, she knew that running would mean death for them both. The human approached her with a bowl of something warm, and she pressed herself harder against the wall, her heart's pounding in her chest. He stopped immediately, setting the bowl down on the floor between them and stepping back with his hands raised. "Food," he said, pointing at the bowl, then miming eating with his hand. She understood the gesture, but did not trust it on their home world, on the ships that had carried them as slaves. Food was never given freely. There was always a price, always a demand, always pain waiting at the end of kindness. The human seemed to understand her hesitation, because he picked up the bowl, took a large bite of the contents himself, chewed and swallowed with obvious enjoyment, then set it back down and retreated to the other side of the room. He was proving it was safe. She realized with shock he was eating his own food to show her it was not poison. Her empty stomach growled loudly enough that even the human heard it, and something that might have been a smile crossed his strange flat face. Slowly, painfully, she crawled forward and took the bowl. The food was simple, some kind of grain with vegetables and a small amount of meat. but it was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. Warm and filling, and given without any demand attached to us, she could not explain, began falling down her cheeks as she ate. And the human made a soft sound of distress and looked away. Giving her privacy for her weakness, who was this creature? The Vellani had been told stories about humans since childhood. Warnings about the monsters who lived on a planet so hostile that it bred killers with every generation. Humans hunted for sport. The stories said humans waged war. Against their own kind constantly, humans consumed the flesh of other beings and felt no guilt, yet this human had walked into a storm that should have killed him to rescue strangers who were not even his species. He had given up his bed and his food and his warmth, and asked for nothing in return. It made no sense. And things that made no sense were dangerous. A small cry from the bed made Vela forget her fear. Instantly, Kira's fever had spiked, and her small body was trembling, and her skin was turning that terrible gray color again. Vela tried to stand and fell, her legs refusing to support her weight, and she cried out in frustration and terror as her baby sister suffered beyond her reach. The human moved fast, faster than she had expected, but not toward Vela. Went to Kira's side and pressed his hand against her forehead, then quickly gathered claws and soaked them in cool water. Placing them gently on the child's skin, he worked with calm efficiency, never panicking, never hesitating, adjusting the blankets and checking her breathing, and doing a dozen small things that spoke of experience and training. Vela watched helplessly as this supposed monster cared for her sister with more tenderness than most Vellani would show their own children. Hours passed. The human did not rest, did not eat, did not leave Kira's side for even a moment. When the child whimpered in her fevered sleep, he made soft sounds and stroked her hair, and incredibly, impossibly, Kira calmed at his touches. Night fell, and the cabin grew dark, except for the fire's glow. The human began to sing. His voice was rough and low, nothing like the melodic tones of Vellani singers. But there was something beautiful in its simplicity. The song was clearly meant for children, gentle and repetitive, and though Vela did not understand the words, she understood the meaning. He was singing Kira to sleep. He was comforting a dying alien child with a lullaby, as if she were his own blood, as if her life mattered to him in ways Vela could not comprehend. Something cracked inside Vela's chest. Some wall she had built during years of running and hiding and suffering at the hands of beings who saw her people as nothing but merchandise. This human did not see merchandise when he looked at them. She did not know what he saw, but it was not that. Dawn came, and Kira's fever finally broke, and the human slumped in his chair with exhaustion written across every line of his face. He had not slept in 3 days. Vela realized 3 days of fighting for the lives of strangers who had given him nothing, could give him nothing, meant nothing to his world or his people. Why? The question burned in her mind like the fever had burned in Kira's body in all her years. Through all the horrors she had witnessed and survived, Vela had learned one absolute truth: kindness did not exist without cost, and anyone who seemed to offer it freely was simply hiding their price. But she could find no hidden motive in this human's actions. He had nothing to gain from saving them, and everything to lose. When Kira finally opened her eyes, weak but aware, the first thing she saw was the human slumped asleep in his chair beside her bed. Any other child would have screamed at the sight of an alien predator so close, but Kira, sweet innocent Kira, who had somehow kept her trust in the universe despite everything they had suffered, simply reached out with her tiny hand and wrapped her fingers around his much larger one. The human woke instantly, but did not pull away. He looked down at the small alien child holding his hand, and his eyes grew wet, and he smiled the softest smile Vela had ever seen on any being of any species. "Hello, little one," he said in his strange, rough language. Kira did not understand the words, but she smiled back, and something passed between them that needed no translation. Vela watched this moment. This impossible connection between a human predator and a Vellani child. And she felt her entire understanding of the universe shift beneath her. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe humans were not monsters. Or maybe, just maybe, this particular human was something the galaxy had never seen before, a Deathworlder with a gentle heart. She did not know which possibility frightened her more. He found two alien sisters freezing in the snow. Now both refused to leave his side. 2 weeks had transformed the small mountain cabin in ways Junho had never expected. The child Kira, as he had learned her name, had recovered with remarkable speed, bouncing back from death's door with the resilience that only the young seemed to possess. She followed him everywhere now, a small blue-silver shadow with enormous curious eyes, watching everything he did with endless fascination. Her sister Viola remained cautious, watchful, always positioning herself between Kira and any potential threat. But even she had begun to relax in small ways that Junho pretended not to notice. The breakthrough had come when Vela's damaged wrist device had finally repaired itself enough to provide basic translation, turning their world of gestures and guesses into something approaching real communication. "Why did you save us?" Vela asked on the first day the translator worked, her voice carrying an edge of suspicion she could not quite hide as Junho had been chopping firewood outside. And he paused to consider the question that clearly meant everything to her. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "That is not an answer," she pressed. "No one helps without wanting something in return, so what do you want from us?" He set down the axe and turned to face her fully, seeing the fear beneath her hard expression. The years of pain that had taught her this terrible lesson about the universe. "I want nothing," he said. "You were dying in the snow, and I could save you. So I did. That is all there is to it." She stared at him like he was speaking a language her translator could not handle. Like kindness without cost was a concept her mind simply could not process. "You are very strange," she finally said, "even for a human." He laughed at that, a warm sound that made Kira look up from where she was playing with Bomi and smile. "I have been told that before," he admitted. Over the following days, the sisters shared their story in pieces, each fragment more horrifying than the last. They were Vellani, from a world that had been conquered and strip-mined by a species called the Korvax. 3 generations ago, their parents had been killed in a resistance uprising when Kira was barely old enough to walk. And Vela, only a teenager herself at the time, had been trying to keep her sister alive ever since. They had been captured by slavers twice, escaped twice, and spent years hiding on the edges of civilized space until a Korvax hunting party had found them again. Ship had been destroyed, and the escape pod had been their last desperate gamble. Aimed at the nearest habitable planet the computer could find, Earth was supposed to be a death sentence, Vela admitted quietly one evening, while Kira slept by the fire with Bomi curled at her feet. "Every species in the galaxy knows that humans are dangerous, that your world kills anything that tries to survive here. We thought we were choosing death over slavery, and instead you found me," Junho said. "Instead we found you," she agreed. And for the first time, something like warmth crept into her voice. He began teaching Kira small things after that, partly to keep her entertained, and partly because her joy in learning made his quiet life feel meaningful again. He showed her how to build a fire safely, how to identify which plants outside were edible, how to make the hot chocolate she had become obsessed with after tasting it. Once she learned the names of earth animals from his books, pointing at pictures and demanding he make the sounds each creature made until he was mooing and barking and roaring like a fool. While she collapsed in giggles, Viola watched these lessons with an expression Junho could not read. Something between gratitude and grief, and a desperate hope she seemed afraid to feel one night. Kira woke screaming. Junho was on his feet before his mind fully registered what was happening. crossing the cabin in 3 long strides to reach the child who was thrashing in her blankets with tears streaming down her face. "The bad ones are coming," she sobbed in her own language, the translator catching up a moment later. "They are going to take me away. They are going to hurt Vela. Please, please, do not let them take me." Junho gathered her into his arms without hesitation, holding her small trembling body against his chest and rocking her gently the way his own mother had done for him decades ago. "Listen to me," he said firmly, waiting until her terrified eyes met his. "No one is going to take you, do you understand?" "No one. But the Korvax," she started. "I do not care about the Korvax," he interrupted. "I do not care about slavers or hunters or anyone else in your galaxy. They would have to go through me first. And I promise you, Kira, I will not let anyone hurt you or your sister. Not while I am still breathing." He had not known if she would believe him. This small alien child who had learned from birth that the universe was cruel and protectors were fairy tales, but a small alien child who had learned from birth that the universe was cruel and protectors were squirrel and protectors were fairy tales. Something in his voice or his eyes must have reached her, because she stopped crying and wrapped her thin arms around his neck and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world made of smoke. "Do you promise?" She whispered. "I promise," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Vela stood in the doorway, having watched the entire scene, and Junho saw the tears on her cheeks catching firelight. She had spent her whole life fighting alone, protecting Kira with nothing but desperation and will, never able to promise her sister safety because she could not guarantee it herself. And now this strange human from a death world had made that promise with such absolute certainty that even Vela wanted to believe him. She crossed the room and sat beside them, allowing herself to lean against Junho's shoulder while Kira dozed between them. "The Korvax will come," she said quietly. "They never stop hunting their prey when they realize we survived. They will come for us. Then I will be ready." Junho replied, "You do not understand what you are saying. They are stronger than you, better armed, more experienced in violence than any human could be." He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It was not bravado or foolishness or the ignorance of someone who had never known real danger. It was calm, certain resolve, the look of a predator who had simply not yet revealed his teeth. "You landed on a death world, Vela," he said softly. "Everything here has had to fight to survive since the moment life began. And I spent 15 years learning how to be more dangerous than anything on this mountain." He looked down at Kira, sleeping peacefully in his arms, and his expression softened. "They chose the wrong planet," he continued, "and they made the mistake of threatening something I have decided to protect. I almost feel sorry for them." Vela stared at him, seeing the human clearly for the first time, not a monster, not a victim, not a simple kind stranger, a guardian and guardians. She was beginning to understand were the most dangerous creatures in any universe. He found 2 alien sisters freezing in the snow. Now both refused to leave his side. The ship came on, a clear morning 3 weeks after the blizzard, descending through clouds with the arrogance of predators who had never known true challenge. Junho saw it first from the window where he had been watching the sunrise, and his blood went cold, even as his mind went sharp. And still, "Vela," he called quietly, not wanting to wake Kira yet. "Come here." She joined him at the window, and the sound she made when she saw the ship was something between a sob and a scream. "Korvax," she breathed. "They found us. They always find us. We should have kept running. We should never have stayed so long." "Stop," Junho said firmly, gripping her shoulders. "I need you to focus. How many will there be?" She struggled to control her breathing. Years of flight instinct warring with something new he had helped plant inside her. 3, maybe 4, she managed. A standard hunting party. They will have weapons, armor, scanners to track our biosignatures. Can Kira be moved? Yes, but could I need you to take her to the cellar? It is hidden beneath a false floor in the storage room and insulated against most scanning technology military surplus from my old work. Vela stared at him, understanding dawning. You prepared for this. I prepare for everything, he replied, already moving toward a locked cabinet he had never opened in their presence. It is why I'm still alive. He pulled out a backpack, heavy and military grade, and began checking its contents with practiced efficiency, while Vela watched in stunned silence. You are not coming with us to hide, she realized. No, Junho. You cannot fight Korvax alone. They are twice your size and born for violence. So am I, he interrupted calmly, pulling out a long hunting knife and checking its edge. The violence part. Anyway, listen to me carefully, Vela, because I'm only going to say this once. He turned to face her, and she saw the man behind the gentle mask he wore. The predator from a death world who had merely chosen kindness over cruelty. I have lost people I cared about before, he said quietly. I was not strong enough, not fast enough, not smart enough to save them. I spent years afterward wishing I had died with them instead of living with the guilt. He reached out and touched her face with surprising tenderness. Then you and Kira fell out of the sky, and you gave me something I thought I had lost forever, a reason to fight again. So I am going to ask you to do the hardest thing you have ever done. What? She whispered, trust me, take Kira and hide. And trust that I will come back to you when this is over. Her instincts screamed at her to refuse, to grab her sister and run the way they had always run, but Kira needed someone to protect her. And Vela was still weak, and deep down she knew that running would only delay the inevitable. This human was offering to stand between them and the monsters that had haunted their entire lives. The least she could do was let him try. If you die, I will find a way to bring you back just so I can kill you myself, she said fiercely. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had already accepted whatever outcome awaited him. Fair enough. 20 minutes later, the Korvax landed their ship in the clearing near the cabin, and 3 hunters emerged with weapons drawn and confidence radiating from every step. They were exactly as Vela had described, massive, armored, built like living weapons with scales that gleamed like metal and eyes that held no mercy. The leader scanned the cabin and laughed. A harsh barking sound, one life sign, he announced to his companions. The human Nivalani females are hiding somewhere nearby. We will extract their location from it before we kill it. They approached the cabin without caution, without fear, without any understanding of the danger they were walking into. The first trap hit them at the tree line. It was a simple thing, a tripwire connected to a falling log, but the force of impact knocked the rearmost Korvax off his feet and sent his weapon flying before his companions could react. Something flew out of the trees and struck the second hunter in the throat. A blade thrown with precision that spoke of years of practice. The leader spun, searching for the attacker, but the forest had gone silent. Show yourself, human, he roared. You cannot hide from Korvax. We will burn this entire mountain to find you. You talk too much. The voice came from directly behind him, and the leader turned just in time to see Junho emerging from a snowbank where he had buried himself. White camouflage making him nearly invisible. The human was smaller than any of them, unarmored, armed with nothing but a knife and whatever primitive tricks this death world had taught him, but his eyes held no fear at all. The fight was brutal and desperate, and nothing like the easy slaughter the Korvax had expected. Junho used the terrain like a weapon, leading them through deadfalls and ice patches and narrow passages where their size worked against them. He used the cold itself, knowing that their reptilian biology struggled in temperatures that merely made him uncomfortable. He used 15 years of search and rescue knowledge to predict where they would move and how they would react and where their armor was weakest. The second hunter fell to a trap hidden beneath thin ice, plunging into freezing water and thrashing until the cold stole his strength. But the leader was smarter, faster, more experienced than his subordinates. He caught Junho in a clearing and hit him with a force that sent the human flying into a tree trunk with a sickening crack. Impressive for a primitive, the Korvax admitted, stalking toward where Junho lay bleeding in the snow. You killed 2 of my hunters. I will make your death slow for that. Junho tried to rise, but his body refused. Something broken inside him grinding with every movement. The Korvax raised his weapon, aiming at the human's chest. Any last words, Deathworlder? Yes, Junho gasped, blood staining his teeth. Behind you. The leader laughed. You think I will fall for... The energy blast took him in the back of the head. Fired by Vela with a weapon she had taken from one of the fallen hunters, she stood at the edge of the clearing, trembling with fear and fury and something that might have been triumph. I told you to stay hidden, Junho managed, pain making his voice thin. And I told you that if you died, I would kill you myself, she replied, rushing to his side. Did you really think I would let you face them alone after everything you have done for us? He wanted to argue, but consciousness was slipping away, and the last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Vela's golden eyes filled with tears and something that looked remarkably like love. He found 2 alien sisters freezing in the snow. Now both refused to leave his side. Spring came slowly to the mountain, melting the snow in patches and filling the air with the sounds of water running and birds. Returning from wherever they had hidden during winter's fury, 3 months had passed since the Korvax had come, and the cabin showed signs of change. Everywhere Junho looked, small drawings decorated the walls. Kira's attempts to capture the beauty of her new world in colorful lines and shapes. A second chair sat at the table, smaller and carved with Vellani symbols that Vela had taught him to recognize. The garden outside had been expanded. Strange alien vegetables growing beside. Earth crops in an experiment that seemed to be working. Despite all odds, Junho stood at the window, a habit, now watching Kira chase Bomi through the meadow with laughter that still made his heart swell every time he heard it. The scars from his fight with the Korvax had healed, though his ribs still ached when the weather changed. Vela had proven to be a surprisingly skilled healer, combining what she knew of Vellani medicine with research from his small collection of books until she had patched him together well enough to survive. You are thinking too loudly, Vela said from behind him, and he turned to find her watching him with that expression she wore more often now, the one that held warmth instead of suspicion. Just remembering, he admitted. Remembering merely dying. Remembering waking up afterward and seeing you and Kira there, realizing I had not lost you. She crossed the room to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. You have a habit of terrifying the people who care about you, she said softly. I have been told that before too. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Kira play, until Bomi suddenly stopped and lifted her head toward the sky with a bark that Junho had learned to recognize. Another ship was coming. He tensed immediately, reaching for the weapon he kept within arm's reach at all times now. But Vela put a hand on his arm. Wait, that is not a Korvax design. It looks like a Galactic Union patrol vessel. The ship descended smoothly into the same clearing where the slavers had landed months ago. But the beings who emerged from it were very different. They wore uniforms instead of armor, moved with careful diplomatic precision instead of predatory swagger. And the first thing they did was broadcast a message of peaceful intent. Junho went out to meet them anyway, positioning himself between the ship and the cabin door. And he noticed that Vela took up position at the window with a weapon of her own. The Union officer approached with hands raised and visible, a gesture of peace that seemed to transcend species. I am Commander Thelvex of the Galactic Union Refugee Services, the alien announced, her translator rendering the words in clear English. We detected a Volani emergency beacon from an escape pod that crashed in this region. Several months ago, we apologize for the delayed response. But the signal was corrupted and difficult to trace. Junho said nothing. Simply watching. We are here to offer assistance to any survivors, the commander continued. We have facilities designed for Volani refugees. Proper food and medical care and community with others of their kind, if the individuals who arrived in that pod are willing. We can transport them to a much better situation than this isolated. No, the word came from behind Junho, and he turned to see Vela walking toward them with Kira holding her hand. Both sisters wore expressions of calm certainty that made his chest tight with emotion. Pardon me? Commander Thelvex asked, clearly confused. We appreciate your offer, Vela said formally, but we will not be leaving with you. The commander looked around at the small cabin, the primitive surroundings, the single human standing guard like he expected the entire Union fleet to attack. I do not understand. This is a death world, one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy, and you are living with a species that most beings consider barely civilized. Surely you would prefer to be among your own kind in safety? Kira tugged on Vela's hand and whispered something, and Vela smiled and nodded. May I answer that? Kira asked, looking up at the commander with those enormous golden eyes. Of course. Little one. Kira stepped forward, and though she was tiny compared to everyone around her, something in her bearing made her seem larger. When our ship crashed, we were dying, she began, her voice clear and strong. We were so cold, and we thought no one would ever find us, and if they did, they would hurt us like everyone else always did. She looked back at Junho with a smile that could have melted the remaining snow on the mountain. But he found us. He walked into a storm that could have killed him, carried us to his home, stayed awake for days to keep us alive, and when the bad ones came to take us back, he fought them alone even though they were bigger and stronger, and he knew he might die. Tears were forming in her eyes now, but she kept speaking. He promised me that no one would ever take me away again, and he kept that promise. He taught me about this world, gave us food and warmth and safety. Never asked for anything. He made us feel like we mattered, like we were worth protecting, like we were family. She turned back to the commander. You want to take us somewhere better, but there is nowhere better than here. This death world is the first place we have ever been safe. And this human is the first person who ever made us feel like we were home. Commander Thelvex was silent for a long moment, studying the scene before her with new eyes, the tiny alien child clutching the human's hand, the older sister standing beside them like she would fight the entire galaxy, before letting anyone separate them, the human himself, scarred and tired and watching his strange family with an expression of such profound love that it transcended any species barrier. I see, the commander finally said, and her tone held something that might have been respect. Then I wish you well. Little family, may you find the peace you have earned. She returned to her ship, and within minutes, the vessel had lifted off and disappeared into the blue sky. Junho watched it go, then looked down at Kira, still holding his hand. You did not have to stay, he said quietly. She was right that there are easier places to live, places with other Volani. Proper technology. Do those places have you? Kira interrupted. No, but then they are not home. Vela moved to his other side, her hand finding his. She is right, Vela added. We spent our whole lives running, searching for somewhere safe, and we found it in the last place we expected, with the last person anyone would have predicted. The galaxy warned us about humans. She continued, her voice thick with emotion, about how dangerous and violent and primitive your species is, but they never warned us about this. About what? About what happens when a human decides something is worth protecting, she said. About how a deathworlder with a gentle heart can become the safest harbor in the universe. Kira tugged at his hand, demanding his attention. Can we go fishing, Uncle June? She asked, using the title she had given him weeks ago. You promised you would teach me when the weather got warmer. He looked at her bright eyes, at Vela's soft smile, at this impossible family that had fallen from the stars and given his life meaning again. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotions he did not try to hide. Let us go fishing. They walked together toward the stream, Kira chattering excitedly about which fish she would catch, Lomi bounding ahead to investigate every interesting smell, and Viola, watching them, felt something she had never truly known before: peace, real, lasting, unshakable peace, because she had learned the truth that the galaxy had somehow missed that the most dangerous thing about humans was not their violence, it was their love, and once a human decided you were theirs, not even the stars themselves could tear you away.